Welcome to Breakthrough Mode, the podcast where we intentionally get into the driver's seat of our lives, shift out of monotony and mediocrity, and step on the gas towards becoming the person we were always meant to become. Hello, and welcome to episode 307 on the Breakthrough Mode podcast. This is Monday Morning with Megan. I am your host, Megan Bauer. Thank you so much for joining me and pushing play on today's episode. This week, we are talking about a topic that I have never directly talked on, which feels really exciting and a little bit nerve-wracking at the same time, because I am used to talking about habits and intentional living and making intentional choices and not reacting, stopping to truly choose, and priorities and decisions and all of this. I am used to all of this realm, and it has felt like I could just talk on all of that forever. And as I thought about this week's topic, I was realizing that this is just different language for what I have been talking about this whole time. This week, we are talking about self-leadership, which really is the thing that I have been talking about this whole time. So the idea here is leading yourself regardless of the situations that you're in, regardless of the circumstances you find yourself in, regardless of what the world is throwing at you, that you aren't reacting, but rather leading yourself through it instead. Because I've never talked about this before in this specific way, I realize that this can feel a little bit abstract. So as I was thinking of a way that I could demonstrate this to you, I thought of something very specific that happens in my life. So there will be a moment, maybe, I'm making dinner, or maybe we're in the car or whatever, and Jake's like, "What are you thinking about?" And immediately I know, okay, I could just blank answer what I'm currently thinking about, but this isn't going to make sense. It's going to feel so out of left field for him if I just give him the exact moment's thoughts. So I will often say, okay, let me tell you how I got here. And I will say, I saw this and that led me to thinking about this, which led me to thinking about this, which led me to thinking about this, which led me to what I was thinking about, which was this. Now, in that chain of thoughts, I was led along. I had one visual cue or maybe one starter thought, which then led to another one, which then led to another one, which then led to another one. That is an example of just being led. I was led by my thoughts. My thinking was led by my thoughts. Now contrast that with the idea of I'm going to sit down and think about this. Or having a train of thoughts and realizing that it is not going to where you wanted to go. You don't want to think about that. That's not going to be productive. It's not going to be helpful. And so instead, you redirect your thoughts. I will often be thinking about something, not like the direction that my thoughts are heading, and literally think, release, which I'm telling my brain to release that train of thought. And then I direct my thoughts to something else. So there's the version of one thought leading to another, leading to another, leading to another. And there's the version of I'm thinking something, but I am going to direct my thoughts this way. I'm not thinking about that right now. I want to think about this. That is the difference between letting your day lead you and leading your day. That is the difference between letting your circumstances, your environment, your whatever lead you and self-leadership. That is what we are talking about here. I realize it's a little bit abstract, but I hope that this example really kind of clarifies things. And if we want to take this to more physical 3D level out of this thought experiment, it can be things like I'm sitting at my desk and I realize I need my planner, which is on my nightstand. And so I leave my desk to go up to get it. And then I see that the dog needs to be let out. So I let out the dog. And on my way back to my room, a kid needs help. So I stop and I help the kid. And then as I start heading to my room again, I'm like, oh, I need to change the laundry. And so I change the laundry. And then by the time I get to my room, I'm like, what did I come in here for? That is a more 3D example of being led by the situation, being led by the environment, specifically the environment, because as I left my office, I saw the dog and reacted to it. I heard the kid and reacted to the kid. I saw that the laundry needed to be changed and I reacted to the laundry. And by the time I got to my room, maybe I did remember that I needed my planner or maybe I didn't, but so often we get to a place where we're like, why did I even come here? I have forgotten because all along the way we were interrupted and reacted to each individual thing. Now, I'm not saying that any of that's good or bad. Of course, the dog needed to be let out. The kid needed to be helped. The laundry needed to be changed. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm giving you an example of what that can look like in the 3D, where it's just reacting. Now, that could be vastly different if I'm on a time crunch. If I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a client call in 5 minutes and I need my planner. That would look more like going upstairs, asking a kid to let the dog out, telling the kid I will help them when I'm done with my call, asking another kid to change the laundry, grabbing my planner and going back down to my desk because I have a client meeting. That is the same situation, but different. That is leading the day, still all of the things getting done, but in a more decisive way. The difference there being, one was very loose-ended. I didn't have a client call that I was, right up against the gun for. And the other one was, I need to be back in my desk within 5 minutes and I need my planner. So the idea this week is leading yourself first. Your day will lead you. Your environment will lead you. Your circumstances, your situation will lead you. It will. If you let it, it will. But the idea here is to lead yourself first. Then you can lead your day. Then you can do the things that are most important to you. Then you can become intentionally. This is actually the trait of intentional living. The trait is self-leadership. Of course, I have a quote for you today. This quote is by Scott Belsky. He's an American entrepreneur and author. I actually never heard of him before I found this quote. And then I was like, who is this guy? And he was a higher up at Adobe for a long time, which is super cool because I love Adobe products. And anyway, this is what he said. I liked it, so I'm bringing it to you. Self-leadership is about awareness, tolerance, and not letting your own natural tendencies limit your potential. I'm going to say that one more time, and then I'm going to briefly unpack it for you. Self-leadership is about awareness, tolerance, and not letting your own natural tendencies limit your potential. First of all, awareness. Awareness is the beginning of everything. You have to be aware where you are not leading yourself, where you are reacting in order to make changes. You have to be aware of where you are and where you want to go in order to move in that direction. Awareness is the beginning to everything. You have to be aware of your patterns, of your habits, of your thought patterns, of all of those things in order to change any of it. Tolerance. I think tolerance was a really interesting one for him to throw in the midst of this. But as I think about it, first of all, you have to be tolerant of yourself as a human being. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to give into moments of not being motivated or moments of not being disciplined. You're going to give into emotions. Second, you have to be tolerant of those around you and the way that they do life, the way that they show up. You're going to have to be tolerant of the world and work with it rather than against it sometimes. So there is an interesting degree of tolerance there because you cannot control everything. You can control you, but there are going to be times where that's easier and times where that's harder. And then the last one, not letting your own natural tendencies limit your potential. The first time I read this, I immediately thought of my morning ritual because this was the thing that really changed my life. And my natural tendency is to sleep in as long as possible. Truly, that is my natural tendency. And that is how I lived for so long. And I knew that if I could change that one thing about me, it would be the beginning to so much more. In Scott's words, it would unlock that potential for me. Because as I was sleeping in as late as I could every day, that was limiting my potential. So you have natural tendencies too that also limit your potential. And what Scott is saying here is that self-leadership is not letting those natural tendencies limit your potential. This is what we are focused on this week. We are focused on self-leadership. It's going to be a great week. Thank you so much for joining me. I totally love you. Bye for now.